For today's video, I want to talk about a trend that I've seen amongst new players, and I've talked about it a bit on stream, figured I would cover it in a YouTube video as well, and that trend is that players are just shoving 6 champions into any deck that they build. After all, champions are powerful cards, and you can run a limit of 6, so why not run all 6 slots? And the answer to that is that champions are powerful when you build around them or when you try to activate them, but there are legitimately times where it can be improper to jam champions in your deck because many of them, if you are not leveling them up, are pretty subpar. And I've got the interface open and I kind of want to go through some of the champions and talk about which ones are just generally good and which ones are build around. And even more so, I want to talk about why the build around ones especially should not just be jammed into any old deck that you are running. So first up, I want to talk about just ones that I think are good. Just flat out, even if you never level them up, are good. And in this case, I want to highlight Elise because a 2-3 for 3 is a fine stat line. Fearsome is a bit of an underrated keyword. The reality is she's really like a 3-4 because on attacking, you're going to get that 1-1 spider that they have to account for. And even if you're not playing a spider deck, if you're playing an aggressive deck, something where you want to be low to the ground, you want a lot of bodies, Elise can help you out even if you never level her up. You do not need a critical mass of spiders to take advantage of her. Lucian can be another card that you could consider to be good without building around him. Now, he is significantly better, like a lot of the champions are, if you can level him up. However, a 3-2 for 2 with quick attack is reasonable. After all, there are similar follower cards, non-champions, that see play with a similar stat line. If you have open slots and you are going to run a similar card, Lucian could be a fit. Another one that is just kind of all around good, in my opinion, is we're almost there. Hecarim. Hecarim is like a mid-range bomb. The 6 health is not to be laughed at, has overwhelm, and offensively attacks for 10 without leveling him up. Now, it is spread across 3 bodies, and it is only on offense, not defense as well. On defense, he's only blocking for 4, or dealing 4, I should say, while blocking. But offensively, for a mid-range or even like an aggressive finisher, you can throw Hecarim in, and even if you never level him up, you're going to get a lot of value out of him. Similarly, let's just real quick, not even comparing him to followers, let's compare him to somebody like Darius. So here we have 6 attack, 5 health, has overwhelm, and this is without leveling him up. Now, Darius leveled up, now has 10 attack, still only the 5 health, and Darius is one of the easier champions to level up. It's certainly not a champion that you have to build around because at the end of the day, we're always trying to kill our opponent, so the Nexus health going down to 10 should be something you're doing. But when you consider the unleveled versions, it's like not even close. Hecarim just kind of blows Darius out of the water, even if you never level Hecarim up. So Hecarim is again kind of one of those champions that you can just put into an aggressive deck as like a top end card or a mid-range deck and feel fine. The last one I want to mention that's kind of just like blanket general good is Tryndamere, and this is really more of a control card. In control decks, a lot of times you spend most of your deck building with reactive tools, right? You expect your opponent to do something and you fill your deck with ways to stop what they want to do. But once you've done that, eventually you have to win the game, so you do that with late game cards. Tryndamere is a very resilient late game card, pushes damage very well with the high attack and overwhelm on both level 1 and level 2. The leveling up of Tryndamere is definitely not something you're building around, so Tryndamere is just kind of like an all-around good late game finisher. That being said, okay, that's about it. All of the other champions, at least in the base set, really are kind of a build-around card. Anivia might be your next close one, but I think Tryndamere is just the better finisher. Anivia, if you're playing a late-game control deck, a lot of times you also want ways to take advantage of Anivia's attacking trigger. Like this skill, you want to be able to take advantage of it. But pretty much everything else is meant to be built around. And if you are not building around it, they're just not good cards. You don't want them in your deck. Let's take Lux just because we're here and look at her. If you're not building a spell-based deck, if you are not actively trying to activate Lux, a 6-cost 3/4 barrier is not a card you want in your deck. Let's pretend this is not a champion, right? There's nothing special about this. This is a follower. If you're building your deck and you're saying to yourself, I want to pay 6 for a 3/4 barrier, I'm going to laugh at you. In any deck, I can't think of a single deck that I want a 6-cost 3/4 barrier. All of the pizzazz, the wow, the whatever you want to call it, that comes from Lux comes from trying to level her up and take advantage of the final sparks. So if you're just a new player building a deck and you want to jam in as many champions as possible and you're playing Demacia and you own a Lux, so you throw Lux in, it's probably a mistake. Because if you're not building around her, she's actively hurting your deck. There are far better things you can put in. Just because a card is a champion does not mean it needs to go in. And again, I know that anytime you see a limitation in deck building, you're kind of trained, especially if you're coming from other card games, to think like, this is a limitation because of a power reason, and thus I need to run the maximum amount, right? If you're coming from Hearthstone or the Elder Scrolls Legends, where you're used to uniques, right? Uniques were a bit overtuned in those games. You can only run one of them as a result, and they did very powerful things when they come down. That's not the case with champions. Champions are not uniques, right? You can still run 3 of them. They are not limited in any way other than the 6 for deck building, and in many ways that's just to give your deck an identity. Don't get me wrong, there's some really powerful champions, but they are not they are not a card you need to just jam in all 6 slots for it. Karma here is another great example, right? In a late game deck, again, maybe spell based, Karma can do some really interesting things when you level her up. But if you're playing, you know, an aggressive or a mid-range Ionia deck, if you're building around Zed, for example, or elusives, and you think, I need to jam in Karma because I'm a new player, I opened one Karma and I just don't have many champions to put in my deck, just don't do it. And I'm saying this because I've seen it on the ladder. I've queued into decks that are running like 5 different champions because somebody went, hey, I just need to put all of the champions I own into this deck. And it's just not what you want to do. Karma, again, not going to fit into your like mid-range or aggressive lists. At best, right, this is a 5-cost 4/3, which is really understated. Yes, you get a random spell, but if you're a combat-based, if you're an elusive-based deck, like, you don't care about the spell because you're not casting that either. So it's actively hurting your deck. Thresh. Thresh is a card I love. In League, Thresh is one of my favorite champions. But if you're not playing a control deck, don't play Thresh. 5 for a 3/6 challenger is okay, but it's not amazing. Like, there are some really good 5-drops. When you compare Thresh to, like, the Radiant follower, where you're going to potentially get a 5/5 lifesteal tough, a 3/6 challenger just kind of doesn't really stack up, doesn't really add up. And this has the requirement to level up of seeing 6 units die. So traditionally you want to play this in either an ephemeral deck or a control deck where you're going to be killing a lot of units. The reason I like Thresh in control lists is because you're using Thresh and your removal to kind of control the board, but then when he does finally level and you get a free attacking champion from your deck or your hand, ideally you want to pair Thresh with something expensive that you're getting for free, right? To take advantage of as much mana differential as possible, right? If you have a Thresh and you get a free attacking Tryndamere when he levels up, that's amazing. But if you've got Thresh in some aggressive list and you accidentally level him up and you get yourself a free Lucian, it's really not a ton to write home about. So again, you kind of want to build around him. Heimerdinger here, again, like Lux, is a very spell-based card. A 5-cost 1/3 is just not good enough. It's not. And even if you're playing this in some deck where you've got a couple of spells, right? You got 10 to 12 spells or something, Is it really going to be worth it? Are you going to get enough value before this card dies? Probably not. 3 health is still brittle enough that you should expect Heimerdinger to die within a turn or 2. And if you're not getting amazing value in the interim, not worth your time. Yasuo here with the quick attack, not terrible for a 4-drop. 4 for a 4/3 quick attack is not the end of the world. However, if you're not running stuns and recalls, that's all you're getting. So, again, why are you running Yasuo? Just because you own a champion doesn't mean you need to put it in. And I've seen some weird things. I've seen some really weird things. Teemo here, right? If you're not running the Puff Cap deck, Teemo probably doesn't belong in your deck. Now, I say probably because in rare cases, there are some elusive lists where just running a 1/1 elusive is fine. But you have to say to yourself, like, am I willing to run the Poro that's elusive? Because if that card's not crossing your mind in deck building, and you're not playing something that helps out Puff Caps, then Teemo probably shouldn't cross your mind either. Teemo is better. Don't get me wrong. Teemo is better than the Poro because he has upside with just adding potential extra damage. But the amount of upside is pretty small, and a lot of times it's just not going to be worth your time. So I hope you're kind of seeing what I'm talking about here, right? Which is some of these cards, when you compare them to followers, are not very good unless you level them up. Now, right now I'm filtering by champions. Let's take this part off. Let's just clear our filters. And we'll kind of see a little bit more what I'm talking about, right? Let's actually go here and filter by mana, and we'll say just units, right? So these are all the 5-drop units in the game. So here we've got 5 champions that exist at 5. Cards like Vlad, Garen, Heimerdinger, Karma, Thresh. And then as you're coming through and you're looking at these, you know, if I'm playing a control deck and I'm not running a lot of spells, is Heimerdinger going to be better than Chempunk Shredder that also attacks for 5, trades into cards like Garen, and deals 1 damage to all enemy units? Am I going to get more value out of this on average than a Heimer? Maybe. Like, that's the thing you have to consider. Because if you're not getting enough spells to trigger this and really get your value, this might just end up being a better card. And you can run that. You don't have to be afraid to not run your full suite of champions. And it's like this across multiple regions. Like, Garen is great. Of these 5-drops, as far as like just your regular good old fashioned kind of like okay, even if I don't build around him, Garen is fine. But if I only have room for 1 card and my choice is between Radiant Guardian and Garen, I think Radiant Guardian is just better. All around better. What this card does for you is so much more important than what Garen does. So if I can only put 1 in my deck, I'm picking Radiant Guardian every time. Now, a lot of times there is room for both. Great, but this card is bonkers as a follower. Just because it doesn't have this cool gold border around it doesn't mean you need to be afraid to pick it. Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm kind of getting this message across, because as I've said before, I've seen it pop up quite a few times on the ladder as we're in these opening days. So consider this like a PSA. It is okay to run decks that do not have all 6 champion slots filled. You do not have to try to fill them. I know that it feels counterintuitive. I mean, even, if we come into my own personal collection, right? Dawn Spiders, which is a list I'm sure everybody's really familiar with by now. But if you're not, this list only runs Elise. As you can see here, I'm just running 3 Elise. I could fit in more champions. I could run Hecarim, and Hecarim's fine. But at the end of the day, I don't think I'm running enough cards to level him up, and I think that I've got better top-end cards. So this is another great example. Hecarim here is competing with cards like Radiant Guardian and Rasa the Sunderer. And here at the top end, I'm looking for finishers, and I'm looking for cards that help me stabilize. And the reason I want them to do a little bit of both is because if I'm getting to these stages in the game with this aggressive list, I want to be able to deal with other aggressive lists. Radiant Guardian with the lifesteal is phenomenal in the mirror. Rasa here helps me deal with opposing threats while giving me a high attack fearsome unit. So in many ways, while Hecarim can help me finish games, it doesn't help me nearly as much as Rasa does. So Rasa wins this slot. and I'm okay with that. So this is, in my opinion, a great example of a deck that only wants to run one champion. There are others. I don't have them built right now, but there are like Piltover aggressive lists where I would only run Jinx as my champion, for example, because while Draven fits that playstyle, if I'm going for like a true all-out aggro with kind of Jinx as my top end, Draven ends up kind of really representing just like a 3/3 quick attack for 3, and that doesn't make the cut. So anyway, that's it. If you made it this far, that's my lecture. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I appreciate you watching the video, and just remember, don't have to run all 6 champions, and have fun out there.